All right, so welcome to the deep dive, and today we're going to be exploring the teachings of Sant Rampalji Maharaj.
Okay.
And this is I'm going to this one pretty blind.
Mm,
I have this text. It's about his book Hindu Sahiban Nahin Samche Gita Ved Puran,
okay.
and it's unlike anything I've really encountered before. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah.
He's talking about reviving what he calls authentic Sanatani worship.
Right.
And I just thought that was really interesting. So I figured let's do a deep dive on this.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating that he doesn't just offer like a new interpretation. He actually challenges a
Right.
lot of what people consider standard practice
Yeah.
and makes some pretty bold claims.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. Who is Sant Rampalji Maharaj?
Okay.
And why should we even care about his take on things?
So he is a spiritual leader, pretty significant following both in India and internationally. He's written a number of books and he uses social media to share his teachings,
Okay.
which all center around what he sees as the true path of Sanatana Dharma.
Okay. So you've got a platform and a message.
Yeah.
What makes his approach so different, though? What is he saying that's shaking things up?
Well, one of the most striking things is his critique of current religious practices.
Okay.
He claims that many of them are based on deception and blind faith, straying from the true understanding of scriptures.
Hmm.
He specifically points to practices like fasting, pilgrimages, and extreme yogic practices as examples.
So he's saying these practices, which a lot of people consider deeply spiritual, are actually missing the mark.
Yeah, that's right.
Huh.
He argues they've become more about ritual and superstition
Okay.
than genuine spiritual growth.
Yeah.
He suggests they don't lead to real peace or liberation.
There's a pretty strong stance. Now, one thing I was curious about, I was looking at the source material. What is his take on the traditional Hindu trinity? Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. I mean, does he even acknowledge them?
That's where it gets really interesting. He doesn't reject them outright.
Okay.
In fact, he actually describes them as merciful beings.
Okay.
But he also emphasizes that their power is limited.
Okay.
They govern specific realms, Swarlok, Patalok, and Prithvilok. But his belief is that there's a higher power, a supreme god called Param Akshar Brahm, who rules over countless universes beyond these realms.
So if Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh aren't the ultimate authority,
Right.
then who is?
Yeah.
And how do we connect with this supreme god, this Param Akshar Brahm?
So according to Sant Rampalji Maharaj, the path to true salvation or moksha is a two-step process.
Okay.
First, he says you have to worship Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, but in a way that's aligned with the scriptures, not just blindly following rituals.
Okay. So there needs to be a real understanding behind the worship.
Exactly.
What's the second step?
This is where it gets really intriguing. He says you need to seek guidance from a Tattvarshi sant.
A Tattvadarshi Sant. What is that?
Yeah, so it's essentially a saint who possesses true spiritual knowledge, someone who can guide you towards the supreme God.
Mm-hmm.
And he even backs this up with verses from the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, that's really interesting. Now, I'm familiar with the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
But I don't recall anything about a Tattvadarshi Saint. Which verses is he talking about?
So he points to verses like 8.3 and 8.10, which describe the supreme God. He also mentions verse 15.77, which talks about the difference between the perishable, the imperishable, and the supreme divine. And perhaps most importantly, he highlights verse 18.62, which emphasizes the importance of surrendering to the supreme God for ultimate peace.
So it seems like he's really weaving together these ancient texts to support his claims.
He is.
So how does this all tie back to his idea of reviving authentic Sanatana Dharma? What does he actually mean by that term?
So he describes Sanatana Dharma as the original eternal faith that was practiced correctly during the Satug or Golden Age. And this is where things get even more interesting. He claims that there are actually 5 Vedas.
5?
Not just the 4 that most people know about.
Wait, 5 Vedas? I only ever heard of 4. The Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda.
Right.
What's this 5th Veda all about?
He calls it the Sukshma Veda.
Sukshma Veda.
And he claims that it contains the ultimate spiritual knowledge, the key to understanding the true essence of Sanatana Dharma.
Okay, so if this Sukshma Veda holds such crucial knowledge, what happened to it? Why have I never heard of it before?
That's exactly what he's trying to address. He suggests that the Sukshma Veda has been lost or forgotten over time, leading to the fragmentation of faith and the rise of all these different sects and interpretations,
Right.
many of which he sees as based on blind faith and misguided practices.
It almost sounds like a fall from grace narrative, like humanity has strayed from the true path.
Yeah, you could say that.
Is that what he's suggesting?
He believes that the original knowledge, the true essence of Sanatana Dharma, was lost because people abandoned the Sukshma Veda and started relying on their own interpretations and rituals, which went against the scriptures.
So who does he blame for this deviation from the true path? Does he identify any specific figures or events that led to this decline?
Yes, he actually points to King Ikshvaku as the last upholder of the true tradition before things started to go wrong.
Okay.
And he uses the example of Rishabdev's extreme practices to illustrate how people started to deviate from the scriptures.
Okay.
He even connects this back to the Bhagavad Gita, specifically verses like 6.16 and 17.5-6, which criticize excessive practices.
Okay, so he's making a case for this decline of true worship.
Right.
But where does the Bhagavad Gita, a text many Hindus consider central to their faith, fit into all of this?
Mm-hmm.
If he's claiming that true worship was lost long ago, how does he reconcile that with the Bhagavad Gita?
That's a really good question, and it's one that he addresses directly. According to his teachings, the Bhagavad Gita was revealed a very long time after true worship had already declined.
Okay.
He estimates it was revealed around 3,787,900 years after the decline.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is. So is he saying the Bhagavad Gita is irrelevant? Does it contradict his understanding of Sanatana Dharma?
Not quite.
Okay.
He believes the Bhagavad Gita is still important, but he argues that it was revealed during a time when non-scriptural rituals and interpretations were already widespread.
Okay.
So he emphasizes the need to understand the Gita within the context of this decline and to distinguish between its true message and the distortions that arose over time.
So he's basically saying the Bhagavad Gita needs to be interpreted through a very specific lens, his lens, in order to be understood correctly.
Yeah.
But if things have been so distorted for so long, how does he propose to set things right?
Right.
What's his solution to this spiritual decline?
He sees his mission as reviving this original Sanatani worship, bringing it back into alignment with the Vedic scriptures, including the Sukshma Veda.
And remember that Tattvarshi sant we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, he claims to be that very sant.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yeah.
He's saying that he's the one, the Tattvarshi sant, who's going to restore this ancient knowledge and guide people back to the true path.
Yes.
That's a pretty bold claim, don't you think?
It is a bold claim, and it certainly raises some questions.
It does.
But what's interesting is that he directly connects this claim back to the Bhagavad Gita itself.
Really? What verse is that?
He points to verse 4.34, which advises spiritual seekers to approach a Tattvarshi sant for true knowledge. He uses this verse to support his claim that he is that very sant.
Okay, so he's positioning himself as a kind of spiritual authority.
Yeah.
The one who holds the keys to unlocking this lost knowledge. But if he's so focused on going back to these ancient practices,
Right.
how does he view other religions and spiritual traditions? Does he acknowledge their validity?
That's a crucial question, especially in today's diverse world.
Right.
And what's intriguing is that he does emphasize the importance of unity and humanity.
Okay.
He has this powerful quote where he says, Jeev hamari jati hai, manav dharm hamara, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai, dharm nahi koi nyara.
Okay, what does that mean?
It translates to humanity is our caste, humanitarianism is our religion.
Okay.
Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, there is no other religion.
So on one hand, he's promoting a very specific path based on these ancient scriptures.
Right.
And on the other, he's talking about unity and a shared humanity that transcends religious boundaries.
Yeah.
That seems like a bit of a paradox, wouldn't you say?
It definitely raises some questions about how he reconciles these seemingly contradictory ideas.
It does.
But to understand his perspective more fully, we need to delve deeper into this concept of Manav Dharma, this
Right.
idea of humanity being our true religion.
All right, let's explore that further.
Yeah.
So if humanity is our true religion, who is the supreme God that unites us all, according to St. Rampalji Maharaj?
According to the text, he identifies the supreme God as Kabir Sahib, the ultimate creator of all.
Kabir Sahib. I'm not familiar with that name.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from? Is that a Vedic deity?
That's where his deep dive into ancient scriptures comes back into play.
Okay.
He claims that Kabir Sahib is the true supreme God described in the Vedas, and he uses specific verses to back up this claim.
Okay, which verses is he using to support this idea of Kabir Sahib as the supreme God? This is getting really fascinating.
Well, for example, he cites Atharva Veda 4.1.7, which describes a powerful and eternal Lord.
Okay.
He also points to Rig Veda 9.82.1, which talks about a purifier and sustainer of all. And he even brings in the Bhagavad Gita again, specifically verse 17.23, which reveals the mantra Tat Sat as the path to salvation. He claims that these verses actually refer to Kabir Sahib.
So he's essentially reinterpreting these well-known verses and applying them to Kabir Sahib. It's like he's trying to connect the dots between these ancient texts and his own beliefs. But what does he say about Kabir Sahib? What are his key attributes?
He paints a picture of Kabir Sahib as a truly cosmic being, claiming that he governs countless universes and is the creator of everything.
Wow.
This isn't just a small-scale deity. He's talking about a force on an unimaginable scale.
That's a pretty mind-boggling concept.
Yeah.
You know, as we're talking, I can't help but think about that quote you mentioned earlier about Saint Kabir's Ji. It seems to support this idea of Kabir Sahib's vast cosmic power.
Right.
What was it exactly?
Yes, you have a good memory. It's quite a striking quote.
Yeah.
Saint Charybdis Ji describes Kabir Sahib as the one who created the moon, sun, and the vast expanse of the universe, emphasizing his dominion over countless realms.
Wow, that definitely gives a sense of the scope of his power.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from his critique of current practices to his claims about the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, all the way to Kabir Sahib and this concept of Manav Dharma. It's clear he's presenting a very specific and intricate spiritual framework.
He is.
But I have to ask, what does this all mean for the average person? What are the practical implications of his teachings?
That's a great question, and one we should definitely explore further.
Okay.
From what we've seen so far, it seems that Sant Rampalji Maharaj is calling for a return to a more scripturally based form of worship.
Okay.
He emphasizes the importance of true understanding over blind faith and rituals. And a big part of that seems to be finding a Tatdarshi Sant for guidance.
Okay.
But how does he suggest people go about doing that?
Right.
And what about those who might not agree with his interpretation of the scriptures? Where does that leave them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Those are all really important questions. And I think it's time to dive even deeper into these teachings and explore their potential implications.
Absolutely.
It's like he's built this whole system pulling from these ancient texts and weaving them together with his own interpretations. But how does he expect people to navigate all of this? It seems pretty complex, especially if you're not already deeply versed in Hindu scriptures.
That's a good point. It's certainly not a simple path he's laying out.
Yeah.
And you're right, it assumes a certain level of familiarity with these ancient texts, which not everyone has.
Right.
But based on his teachings, the key seems to lie in finding a genuine Tattvadarshi Sant.
Okay, but how do you even identify a true Tattvadarshi Sant?
Right.
There are so many spiritual leaders out there, all claiming to have the answers.
Yeah.
How do you know who to trust?
Well, he doesn't leave you completely in the dark.
Okay.
He provides some guidelines in his teachings.
Okay.
For example, he emphasizes that a true Tattvadarshi Sant will always base their teachings on the scriptures, not on personal opinions or interpretations.
So it's about looking for someone who's deeply rooted in those ancient texts.
Yes.
But wouldn't that mean you'd have to become a scholar yourself just to verify their claims?
That's where the challenge lies, I think.
Yeah. He puts a lot of emphasis on personal responsibility and the importance of diligently studying the scriptures.
Right.
But as you pointed out earlier, it's a complex and daunting task.
It feels like there's a tension there.
Yeah.
On one hand, he stresses this individual pursuit of knowledge.
Right.
But on the other hand, he claims to be the Tattvadarshi Sant.
Yeah.
The ultimate guide.
Right.
How does he reconcile those two things?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
It seems to suggest a kind of paradox within his teachings.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he's saying, study the scriptures diligently,
Right.
but ultimately trust me.
And that leads us back to his claim of being the Tattvadarshi Sant. He's essentially asking people to put their faith in him.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about a return to a scripture-based faith,
Right.
where does faith itself fit in? Isn't that a bit contradictory?
It definitely raises some questions about the nature of faith and authority within his teachings.
Yeah. Is it about blind faith in him as the top Dr. Saint, or is it about cultivating a deeper understanding of the scriptures for yourself?
It seems like those two things might be at odds with each other.
Yeah.
And it also raises the question of how he views other faiths and spiritual traditions.
Right.
He talks about Manav Dharma, humanity, as our true religion.
Mm-hmm.
But does that mean he sees all religions as valid paths?
That's a crucial question, especially when you consider the implications of his claim that only his interpretation of Sanatana Dharma leads to true salvation.
Right. If he believes his path is the only one, where does that leave everyone else? How does that align with his message of unity and humanity?
There's a tension there, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to that question of interpretation.
Okay.
He's interpreting these ancient texts in a very specific way.
Right.
And he's claiming that his interpretation is the correct one, the one that leads to liberation.
It's almost like he's creating a new orthodoxy,
Right.
even as he's challenging existing orthodoxy.
Exactly. He's essentially saying, yes, many current practices are misguided, but here's the true path, the one I'm revealing to you.
So while he might be appealing to a sense of unity and shared humanity, he's also drawing very clear lines,
Right.
separating those who follow his path from those who don't.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the practical implications of his teachings.
Right.
If you're someone who's interested in exploring this path, what would that actually look like?
Well, based on his teachings, it would involve a deep commitment to studying the scriptures,
Okay.
specifically the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, but through the lens of his interpretation. It would also likely involve seeking guidance from those who follow his lineage, those he sees as true practitioners of this revived Sanatana Dharma.
So it's not just about reading these texts on your own. It's about joining a community, accepting their guidance, and following their interpretations.
That seems to be the case.
Okay.
He's essentially creating a new lineage, a new way of understanding and practicing Sanatana Dharma, and he's inviting people to become part of it.
And this brings us back to something we touched upon earlier, this idea that he's claiming to reveal the true path to liberation.
Yes.
The path to connecting with this supreme God, Kabir Sahib. What does he say about the actual experience of connecting with Kabir Sahib? What does that look like?
That's where his teachings get a bit more mystical.
Okay.
He talks about the possibility of achieving a state of divine consciousness, a union with Kabir Sahib.
Okay.
But he emphasizes that this is not something easily attained.
Right.
It requires complete surrender and adherence to his teachings.
So it's not just about intellectual understanding.
Right.
There's an experiential aspect to it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He talks about achieving a direct personal experience of the divine. A level of consciousness that transcends the limitations of the physical world.
And that brings us back to a question we've been circling around. How do his teachings address the existence of other faiths and spiritual traditions?
Right.
All of which also claim to offer paths to liberation.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
He doesn't shy away from claiming that his interpretation of Sanatana Dharma is the true path.
Right.
But he also talks about this concept of Manav Dharma, humanity, as the ultimate religion. So how does he reconcile those two seemingly contradictory ideas?
It's a puzzle for sure.
Yeah.
On one hand, he's advocating for a very specific, exclusive path based on his interpretation of ancient texts.
Right.
And on the other hand, he's emphasizing unity and a shared humanity that transcends religious boundaries.
And that tension, I think, is at the heart of what makes his teachings so fascinating and so challenging.
Yeah.
He's offering a vision of spiritual truth that's both ancient and modern, both exclusive and inclusive.
It's like he's simultaneously building walls and breaking them down.
Right.
He's creating a new spiritual framework while also calling for a recognition of our shared humanity. So, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what key takeaways should we keep in mind as we continue to explore Sant Rinpoche Maharaj's teachings?
I think it's crucial to recognize that he's presenting a very particular interpretation of Sanatana Dharma.
Right.
One that's deeply rooted in his own reading of the scriptures.
Right. It's not just Hinduism 101.
Yeah.
It's a very specific lens through which he's asking us to view these ancient texts and traditions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as with any spiritual teaching, it's essential to approach it with a critical mind, to question assumptions, and to seek out diverse perspectives.
It's about engaging in a thoughtful and informed exploration, not simply accepting everything at face value.
Right.
And that's something we should always keep in mind, especially when encountering teachings that claim to hold the exclusive key to truth.
Yeah, it's almost like he's inviting you into this whole new way of seeing the world, one that's rooted in these ancient texts, but also kind of relevant to modern life.
Right.
It's a compelling idea, for sure. It is compelling, and that's partly why I think his teachings resonate with so many people.
Yeah.
He's offering a sense of certainty in a world that often feels uncertain, a path to connect with something bigger than ourselves.
And that's something we all crave, right? That
Yeah.
sense of belonging, of purpose, of connection to something greater.
Yeah.
But the question remains, how do you reconcile this very specific path he's laying out with this emphasis on Manav Dharma,
Right.
on the unity of all humanity?
That's the real crux of it, isn't it? If he's claiming to hold the sole key to true liberation,
Right.
how does that align with his vision of a world united by our shared humanity?
Right. Does he believe that people of other faiths can achieve liberation through their own traditions? Or is he saying that everyone needs to follow his interpretation of Sanatani Dharma to reach that ultimate goal?
That's something you'd have to delve deeper into his teachings to fully understand.
Okay.
But it does highlight a key challenge when engaging with any spiritual teaching that claims to have the exclusive truth.
Exactly. It raises questions about inclusivity, tolerance, and the possibility of different paths leading to the same destination. And I think that's a conversation worth having, especially in today's world where different cultures and faiths are increasingly interconnected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial to engage with these teachings critically,
Yes.
to ask tough questions, and to consider the implications of accepting one path as the only valid one.
And it's not just about intellectual debate.
Right.
It's about recognizing the lived experiences of people from diverse backgrounds and beliefs.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about respecting the richness and complexity of human spirituality,
Mhm.
recognizing that there might not be a one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to the search for truth and meaning.
So as we wrap up this deep dive